questions, comments, further insight?
All right, friends, as you have questions or comments, feel free to unmute yourself and speak into the room here.
Daniel.
Thank you, Chris, for that presentation. I enjoyed it, as I did yesterday. I was going to just add a comment. You're talking about the relationship of data analysis and research to wisdom, not just knowledge, but wisdom. I like to also think about it in terms of worship. I remember hearing someone mention it years ago, but they said mission research done well should move us to worship.
Excellent point, Daniel. Yes, I'm looking in general at the significance of a number in the Bible and how we should react when we see a number in the Bible. And certainly one of the ways I've identified, as well as seeing how big it is, one of the things I've identified is that sometimes it should lead us to worship, to wonder, to amazement. I'm amazed that there are somewhere around 1 septillion stars in the universe. And God calls them all by name, apparently. It's a lot of names. I also, talking about wonder, I also sometimes think, muse or say before the Lord, Lord, I am but dust, but every day from dust you clothe 1 billion flowers in glory. And then I found myself wondering, actually, how many flowers are there blooming in the world at any one time? And I think it must be well more than 1 billion. Well more than 1 billion. God is such a profligate God, wonderful God. Well, Dan, maybe we'll get more time for the next presenters.
I was just contemplating how getting wisdom and so forth needs us to be in prayer and just listening in prayer. And the disciples in the boat finally heard his voice saying, remember this, remember, we've got to be listening, and that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chris, I wanted to just say something. Thanks for your talk. I think it's so insightful, that story of the spies in Numbers 13, that the two had faith. And I'm reminded of a Bible passage which somebody's can tell me the reference to. I can't remember. There is in the New Testament, we're told about an example that there were some people who didn't combine the information with faith. Help me out with what is that passage?
I think it's talking about the Israelites in the desert, that they did not mix whatever it was with faith. It's probably in Hebrews, but
Hebrews,
someone else
Hebrews,
can probably put it in the chat.
Yes, so that is a challenge to us all to approach data with faith, because those people had the same data and yet came up with two completely different interpretations. How often have we faced that in our work, where we put up the same information on the screen and one set of people say, wow, look what God's doing. Another set of people say, that can't be right, etc. We've all had that situation, I'm sure.
Yeah. That takes me back to the question of yesterday about when to look at data or to do research is to deny faith. I'm not sure that's the right way to look at it. I think everything that does not proceed from faith is sin, as it says somewhere else in the Bible. And I think we need to make sure that as we do research, we're doing it in faith. As we handle data, we're doing it in faith. And that will lead to a better outcome than doing it without faith. But I don't think we're faced with a choice of either we're in faith or we look at data. And I'm not sure that we're ever faced with such a choice. Danny.
Can you unpack what looking at data with faith means to you? Because I feel like there's two ways to look at it. One, you can look at data and say, oh, everything is going to go well, or you can look at data and get extremely cynical from it. I don't think faith really has to do with one or either of those avenues. So can you unpack that for me a little bit?
Oh, I don't know, Danny. I'm not sure whether I can. It's not, I mean, the question came to me, it came from somebody yesterday, and I don't know that I'd really given it much thought beforehand. So anything I say now would not be well considered. But I'll certainly be thinking in future about the nature of faith, but or the way that faith interacts with information. It's intriguing when Jesus heard about the death of John the Baptist, so he received that information. His response was to go away and pray. And then following that, he changed the primary location of his ministry, based on presumably what he understood from the Father and what he, if I can use human terms in relationship to Jesus, which I think we can, as he analyzed and interpreted the information that he had that John had been beheaded, he came to certain conclusions. I think a lot is to do with motivation here. If we go into some data work, information work in pride, or seeking to justify ourselves, or to justify our organization, or to get a favorable view from others, maybe because we can get some money from them or something, those are dangerous ways to go in. If we're not sure whether we have the faith, we can always, in prayer to God, submit what we're doing to him. And that's something I'm often doing. Even when I think I am right, I will submit it to God and ask him to correct and change if it's wrong. John.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chris, I agree. I think I agree with you that it depends on how you look at research, because often we do research, and when we do it for the Bible, we call it exegesis, and that's good. We compare words, we look at the context. People applaud that kind of research. They say, well, that's good. You're exegeting the Bible, but you're really just doing research. What does it mean? How does it fit together? And no one has an issue with exegesis, biblical exegesis. Same thing with yourself. When you exegete yourself, what are my sins? What are my calling? What are my spiritual gifts? People applaud that. The problem is people have trouble with the third one. Who is my neighbor? And when you start exegeting who is my neighbor, which was the good Samaritan story, the context, who are they? Where are they? How do I reach them? Then people start to have a problem with that one, but you're actually doing research in all three, and all three are spiritual exercise. You're not going to know your neighbor unless you understand who they are and where they are and what are their needs, or how do I reach them. And so to me, I don't see it as different. Yeah, there are different forms of exegesis, the Bible, yourself, and then the context, the who is my neighbor. But really, you're just doing research. And again, two of them we have no problem with. Oh, that's good. And then the third one, some people go, oh, don't do it. That's not biblical. I don't see it that way.
That's very interesting, John. and we probably bring the same sort of character to all three types of exegesis. I find myself applying, being a data person, I find myself applying data techniques to my Bible study, which, you know, loads of people would never do. But yeah, Stephanie, you're muted, yeah.
A real live example to share with Danny in response to his question. Can you give an example of how, let me close the door here. When we seek wisdom, and divine input into our analysis of data, how it can change the course of a project or change the course of our hearts. We were doing a research project in conjunction with MANI, the Movement for African National Initiatives, and we called the project Go North, because at the MANI conference at which Chris spoke, it was felt by the churches in Africa that there was a rich resource of Christians from sub-Saharan Africa that God might want to use to move northward into North Africa. And so we surveyed, we had 96 or so respondents, sub-Saharan Africans who had moved to North Africa, to ask them what their major barriers were in ministry in the North. And we looked at the data, we looked at the spread of answers, and we just weren't feeling like the data was saying anything. Is language the issue? Is it skin color? Is that the issue? Is it visa acquisition? Is that the issue? What is what are the barriers, the big barriers to getting sub-Saharan Africans into North Africa? And we looked at the data and it didn't shout anything at us. So we took a step back and we prayed. And then we said, let's look at the data in a different way. Instead of looking at the specific barriers that were mentioned, let's look at the total population size. And we saw that more than half of the respondents answered that question with the word none. There was no barrier to sub-Saharan Africans ministering in North Africa. So instead of our looking at this question from the obstacle perspective, this isn't going to happen, we looked at it from the positive resource perspective. This is going to happen because there aren't huge barriers for sub-Saharan Africans moving into the North. So that was an experience that we had in reevaluating our initial look at the data under the conviction that God is at work. Let's ask again.
That's encouraging, Stephanie. Prayer.
We have time for perhaps one more question from Alphaeus.
Thank you so much. I put my question on the chat. I don't know if you can read it. But basically, because where I am, there's a lot of noise, so I don't want to speak. But the question is basically, you talk about unsystematic data gathering. I wanted to know why are you talking about unsystematic? Isn't data gathering, shouldn't it be systematic? And the way you just presented how Jesus Christ gathered that data, looking at the things, isn't that the systematic work? And so I just want to hear the connection of that.
Okay, Alphaeus, that's a great question, and I'm reading it as well in the chat. Thank you very much. I think I was referring primarily to my theology, claiming that my theology is unsystematic. And that's because there's so much available to us that I'm nowhere near putting a complete system together of theology of information or information work. And I don't think even once I've completed this book, it'll be that way. And it's somewhat of a reference to a discipline that we've had in Western theology to attempt a systematic theology where everything works and fits together, all the ideas about God all fit together perfectly. And actually, I'm beginning to think in my own understanding and reading that it's pretty well impossible to fit things together perfectly, and that actually we have to run with different paradigms. But I would advocate both systematic and unsystematic data gathering and data analysis.
Thank you.